We'll start with the marketing dashboard, though. This is one that's been this one of our bread and butter sorts of dashboards. And this is really about targeting members for their external loans and shares. Probably less of a concern right now with everything else going on, but once things kind of get back to normal, this is something that's usually very interesting for most market departments. And they normally have a really hard time getting this data right now about, we know we have these great relationships with our members, but we know that they have relationships with other financial institutions. We just don't know who or for what. Someone will go pay the king's ransom to Experian and get the trade line data, but that's pretty challenging. It's very, very costly and it's not very timely. Or you go to your IT group and beg and plead and hope that they'll go create a report for you to go do this. And so what you're seeing here was actually pulled from a customer's environment. Obviously, it's been heavily cleansed, but you'll get a pretty good sense of how this behaves. And so we capture a lot of different loan types: credit cards, auto loans, mortgages, student loans. And these colorful bars are just demographic breakdowns, but this is all configurable. This is how we kind of deploy it right out of the gate by default, but you can configure it to be any way you want it to be. That's one of the great things about Spotfire is you're not stuck with whatever it is we give you, and you don't have to go write a bunch of code around it. You can go configure these things to be whatever it is you want it to be, different age breakdowns, length of membership, credit score, what have you. So in this instance, we're just going to go create a campaign for members who are between, say, 25 and 45, and they have an external mortgage, and they're with Wells Fargo. There's 500 members with $650,000 worth of payments over the last 3 days. You can see I've got some cleansed up member information down here at the bottom left that you can export out and go bring into whatever it is your current campaign management platform. We're not trying to replace your campaign management platform. We're trying to create better lists for it. So if you think about, sorry, was there a question there? Got a little pop of noise there.
I don't think so. No.
Okay. So if you think about it, so instead of, we've all seen the giant campaigns that the credit unions can sometimes do where you send a blast of, we're going to blanket basically every member with this offer, not really kind of be very specific. And you've all seen the kind of messaging that goes along with, dear quote unquote valued member, here's your quote unquote special offer. And it doesn't feel very special, right? But if you're targeting only 500 members who have a Wells Fargo mortgage, you can be very targeted in your offer and your language, and you know how you can better serve that member with that Wells Fargo mortgage than what they're currently being served. So even if you never mention it directly, you can be very, very specific. So you're only touching them for something that is very relevant to them, but you're also not touching them for things that are not relevant to them, so you don't get to contact fatigue that you get with a lot of those larger campaigns. Any questions or thoughts about that?
No.
Okay. So let's look at credit cards really quickly. So some of the other things we do is that you can add additional filters to these. Once again, these are just examples. So lots of our customers will add things like do not contact filters or something like that to this list to make it very, very easy. So before they even start, they remove people who don't want to be contacted by email or phone or what have you. So in this case, we're going to say we want to run a campaign for credit cards, but we want to run a campaign where we want them to carry a credit card balance because we want them to, it's really about a transfer balance is the point of the campaign. So it makes sense to target members who carry a credit card balance, and this is based on analytics that we've done on the transactional records, and we attach it to their member records. And we do want them to have direct deposit, and they have a debit card with us, and they're between 25 and 45, and they're with Capital One. So there's 1,100 members worth $800,000 every single month, and then go create your campaign. And now you're doing it even more specifically. You're not just saying they're between 25 and 45, and they have a credit card with Capital One. Now you're saying, and they carry a credit card balance, and they have direct deposit with us already, and they have a debit card. And you can kind of continue to add these filters to get these campaigns as specific as you like. So it's not just a couple of slices. You can put it in multiple slices and have a lot of control around it and not have to go back to your IT group every single time you want to add in these things. You have a lot more control over it. Questions or thoughts about that?
No, looks good.
Perfect. Do you know if your marketing department is this something they're kind of gnashing at the teeth to get to today, or are they buried in other things right now?
We don't have any kind of marketing software for this.
Okay. All right. So for some of our customers, depending on how the transaction records are configured, more importantly, their ACH payments, some credit unions will get external share data and some do not. We'd have to look at yours to know that for sure. But this is really just the same idea, just look at the other side of the arrangement. So these are members who have a loan with you and they're paying for that with a share from somewhere else. So let's say, well, 25 to 55, and they've got a share from Wells Fargo, and there's $100,000 worth of payments that are coming in every single month. So this is really, really good for credit unions that have lots of indirect members, and so having just even one more piece of information about where those share accounts may be can really help bring those members and help them be a little more full-fledged member. Same idea, just other side of the coin. Questions about that?
Nope.
Okay. We capture also the point of sale transactions as well, and really this started out of a need for wanting to capture people for HELOCs and to capture people who don't already have a mortgage with the credit union. And so we take all the point of sale transactions and we classify them beyond just what's in the merchant category code. One of those categories is home improvement. If you click on that, then you can see that I got the same colorful bars. Same idea as the ACH, but I'm using the point of sale transactions to drive it. What you're seeing here is actually the merchant category codes. As you see, it's a really, really long list, and that's a big reason why we kind of create these higher level classifications, because the list gets so long and so challenging to work with. You can still drill into the big box stores though, and then if you keep clicking through, then you'll end up with 6,000 members, and you go create your campaign to say, here's all the members who spent $500 at Home Depot over the last 30 days, go create your HELOC campaign. So very much same idea, just leveraging your point of sale transactions versus your ACH transactions to target some segment of your population for some specific behavior. Questions about that?
No, that's kind of cool though.
Perfect. So another big one is that food is a major one. So there's lots of credit unions who have different campaigns, or they partner up with different restaurants in their area. So trying to figure out which ones are out there or something like that has been historically very, very challenging. So this gives them another way to kind of quickly say, certain member groups will do these ones, and here's the people we should reach out to go create this campaign around or this promotion with. Is the external loan summary. So if you talk to most credit unions and you say, okay, well, who's your biggest competitor? It's always big banks down the street. But when you ask the next question of, well, for what products and for how much, one of two things usually happens. Either one, you get a lot of back of the napkin kinds of numbers. Well, we think it's about X number of $1 million, or you get a report that was generated 5, 6, 7 years ago that's still being referenced. So neither one is super accurate. Well, by leveraging your transactional records, we can compile essentially a real-time view of who your credits are, both in terms of product and by specific name. So in this case, this particular credit union loses $24 million a month in external credit card payments. And if I click on that, I can get a real-time view of how does that break down. They lose $4.2 million to Citi every 30 days. And so as a credit union, you can now start to have a much more realistic conversation of what is it that Citi's doing? Is it a specific product? Is it a specific niche? What are they doing that we're not doing? If we go after them, we spend $100,000 and we get 3% of that, what does that mean to us? Before, all of those conversations were very generic and very back of the napkin. Now you can have very specific, very targeted, and very realistic expectations and conversations around who your competitors are and for what and what you hope to get out of it. So let's talk about some of our other kind of standard dashboards. So let's talk about a CEO one. And so we created this dashboard just kind of to show what a kind of a high-level CEO dashboard might look like. We have no expectations that this is the only things that a CEO would want to look at. This is one that we expect that the moment it gets deployed, it gets changed almost the same day that it gets deployed. And that's kind of what we've seen so far, is that it gets deployed and the CEO looks at it and goes, well, I couldn't care less about the loan balance per member. I don't want that. I want this, and I want this. That's a normal sort of expectation. But we kind of wanted to show how you kind of put multiple KPIs on one tab and kind of give a CEO or an executive or a high-level person very, very quick view of what's going on with the members, loans, shares, some accounting metrics. And if you click on one of these, actually, it will take you to one of these tabs, and they can see some additional detail. So they can see the demographic breakdown in terms of the age group, but also the open and close for each of those. And if you click on one of these, you can see that the open and close numbers will actually change dynamically. So they're not just stuck with just these very, very high-level KPIs. They can also do some level of drill into it and see different values. So it's not a ton of drill down, because most CEOs don't want to do that. They want to get some level of drill, but eventually very quickly they're going to say, well, why did my share accounts do X? They want to go ask somebody else that question. They're not necessarily looking to drill into it themselves. Like I said, very basic sort of dashboard, but it's one that gets reconfigured very, very quickly, usually when we deploy. Share balance. So one of the nice things that we do for you is we create a member table. So ARCU and Episys kind of doesn't really look at a single person. It tends to have an account view of the world. So if a member has 5 accounts, you tend to view them 5 different ways, especially for members who have like one account where they've got all these CDs, and they've got another account where they've got their auto loan, and another account where they've got this small business, but it's not under its own tax ID. You tend to treat that person 3 different ways, with 3 different mailings, with 3 different campaigns. You get very, very different kinds of touch points. One of the things that we do is we create a member table that aggregates a lot of that stuff up to a single person versus just an account. One of the things we do along the way is we sum up their share balance and their loan balance. Whether they have 1 account or 10 accounts, we sum it all up. One of the great things that happens when you do that is you can start to say, what is the distribution of my shares in my particular credit union? If you look at it in terms of percentage, you can say, okay, I'm going to take each member and put it into a bucket. Say, this member has between $100 and $500 total shares, between $500 and $1,000, $1,000 and $5,000, so on and so forth. And you can say, for this particular credit union, the number of members who have over $50,000 in shares is 3%, right? So 3% of the members have over $50,000. But when you look at the total amount of shares for the entire credit union, that 3% of the members represents for this credit union 64.5% of all the shares for the credit union. So only 3% of the members hold a lot of their share balance. And this is true for almost every credit we've seen, where there is a very, very large mismatch. Very small percentage of the members represent a very large percentage of their shares. And for some credit unions we've run into, this mismatch is so large that it creates almost a risk for that credit union to even survive, depending on what happens. So I'll give you, for instance, one of our credit unions, 0.7% of their membership represented 80% of their share dollars. And when you dug into that 0.7%, over half of them were over the age of 75. So in terms of risk to their ongoing business, that a very small number of people created a very, very large amount of risk in terms of their share balance. And what's the continuity there? They didn't really have a continuity plan to even reach out to those folks to make sure that should something unexpected happen, what happens to those share dollars? If they should all liquidate in a small period of time, what would happen to the credit union as a whole? So once again, because we could aggregate up to a member, these kinds of conversations get much, much easier to say what is the distribution across your entire membership and aggregate across all accounts, not having to account for that. Okay, so we do the same thing over on the loan side. Once again, you see a little bit of that same sort of unequal distribution. A small percentage of the members have a lot of the loan balance. It's usually not quite as extreme as the share balance, but it still tends to be out there. So once again, when you see it this way, it makes it easier to maybe target a handful of members who maybe have a lot of your loan balance and maybe a higher concentration of your risk. So it's similar to your loan portfolio breakdown in terms of what's your density in certain areas, but it's looking at it in terms of the member instead of the loan asset class instead of. Same idea as the shares, just look at the loans. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. And lastly, on the fees, this is something very, very similar to what we looked at before, and what we found is that a very small percentage of the members usually pay a disproportionate number of the fees. Based upon some other analysis that we've done, that's kind of related to this, is that what you see is that you get a small number of members who end up going negative and going back positive over and over and over again. As a consequence, they represent an extremely large percentage of your fee income. So you see this very, very typically where, in this particular case, 0.8% of their members represents 15% of their fee income. Or move one over, so now you're talking about 2.9% of the population, less than 3% of the members represents 35% of their fee income. So once again, it allows you to kind of have a better conversation around, well, what is happening with those members? Should we be doing something different? Should we be changing our fee structure? Should we be changing our fee structure for down here? It allows you to have some of those conversations because historically it's been challenging to have that conversation in the past because you didn't know what the distribution was. And it was hard to target specific members who brought in overall certain amounts of your fee income. A delinquency dashboard, and I apologize, I have this pointed at test data. I don't have a good example that I can show you too much data of, but obviously this is very, very relevant right now. So this is looking at the amount past due, and you can break it down by days delinquent category. Normally this would be populated with different loan categories and loan types. Like I said, I apologize, this is looking at kind of a test data environment, which is very, very limited. You can break it down by what's the delinquent category, or what's in bankrupt, or what's in a workout. You can look at the amount past due, what's the current balance, so you get a better chance of what's at risk, the total count, and so on and so forth. And you do that on the loan side and on the share side, and do, say, percent of the ODP usage. You can break it down by share category 1, and you can do a bunch of filtering as well. This is another dashboard that's seen quite a bit of use over the last month and a half or so that they didn't have to go create custom reports right away. They kind of already had something that they could kind of go back and reference to and at least get high-level trends and see where things are moving without having to go create a bunch of custom reports.
I mean, other than getting our monthly board packet analysis things done and getting the data, to people that want it, that we spend hours accumulating, I mean, I think that's really going to help.
Yeah, for those board reports, there's having more of this view, and I know some boards will still want paper copies, so they just print out a copy of this. But you can build this ahead of time, so it's because a lot of times it's the same numbers every single month or quarter, so you can really kind of automate a lot of that stuff and not have to pull it by hand into spreadsheets and hand manipulate it and do all those hand formulas every single time. This can really save a lot of effort and pain, and creates a lot more consistency because you don't have to worry about some formula breaking somewhere that you didn't notice.
Yeah, I hear you, totally.